The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and the acrid tang of blood. The once mighty King Zalrith, the so-called Indomitable, now lay in chains, dragged through the streets of New Avalon like a broken animal. His ornate war crown, once a symbol of dominance over lesser species, lay crushed under the boot of a laughing human soldier. Cameras hovered overhead, broadcasting his humiliation to the entire galactic community. He had expected a grand conquest. Instead, he was paraded like a trophy, every step a reminder of his failure. The chains around his wrists were heavy, but not as heavy as the weight of the eyes watching him, millions of them, across thousands of star systems, seeing their would-be conqueror reduced to nothing more than a defeated prisoner. A sudden pull sent him crashing to the dirt, his scaled face scraping against the pavement. A cheer erupted from the crowd as General Dominic Vance stepped forward, his expression cold, calculated. He crouched beside the fallen king, speaking loud enough for every microphone to catch his words. "You demanded war. This is how humanity answers." Zalrith's golden eyes burned with defiance. "You are a primitive species, devoid of honor. Killing me will not change that." Vance smirked, his fingers curling around the tattered remnants of the king's cloak. "Killing you isn't the point." He yanked the fabric free, leaving the alien's body exposed to the mocking laughter of the crowd. "This is." The spectators roared, some throwing scraps of food, others spitting at the once feared monarch. Zalrith could hear their taunts, their crude humor. "Didn't he say he was gonna make us his slaves?" one woman jeered. "Look at him now. Pretty sure my dog walks with more dignity." A burly soldier leaned in. "Hey, King. What's that thing you guys call yourselves? Chosen warriors? Looks like you got chosen to be my new footrest." Zalrith gritted his teeth. He would not break. Not here. Not in front of these apes. His people were watching. They needed to see their leader strong, unshaken. His mind worked through the possibilities, searching for an opening, for any chance to escape. There had to be something. Then he saw her. A flicker of movement in the crowd. A figure draped in tattered rags, barely noticeable among the mass of jeering humans. But he recognized her immediately, Kex-Vel, his most skilled assassin, her golden eyes locked onto his. She had not abandoned him. There was still hope. He adjusted his stance, subtly signaling to her. The moment had to be perfect. The humans were reveling in their cruelty, but they were not invincible. Kex-Vel had smuggled herself into this city. That meant others could have as well. Perhaps. "Get him up," Vance ordered, his voice sharp. Soldiers yanked Zalrith to his feet, dragging him forward. The crowd pressed closer, their hatred palpable. He could feel the heat of their anger, the sheer weight of their vengeance. This was not a simple victory celebration. This was a statement. A message to the galaxy that humanity was not to be trifled with. Zalrith had believed them weak. He had seen their compassion as a flaw, their willingness to negotiate as submission. He had been wrong. A soldier shoved him forward again, and his gaze snapped back to Kex-Vel. She was moving, slipping through the crowd, her hand brushing against the concealed plasma blade beneath her robes. Zalrith steadied his breathing. Soon. It would be soon. Then, as if reading his mind, Vance leaned in, whispering just loud enough for Zalrith to hear. "Go ahead. Try something." The human smile was knowing, taunting. Zalrith felt a chill creep down his spine. The general's gaze flickered toward the crowd, toward Kex-Vel's advancing form. Zalrith's stomach dropped. Vance knew. And he was waiting for it. Before Zalrith could react, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Human snipers, positioned on the rooftops, trained their sights on Kex-Vel. In an instant, a single, precise shot rang out. The plasma round burned through the assassin's skull, dropping her instantly. Zalrith's breath caught in his throat. The only hope he had left crumpled lifelessly to the ground, her golden eyes staring blankly at nothing. Vance exhaled, shaking his head. Pathetic. He turned to his men. Keep moving. Zalrith barely registered the force dragging him forward. His body felt numb. The weight of true defeat settled on him, not just for himself, but for his people. They had seen it. The last ember of resistance snuffed out in an instant. Humanity had anticipated everything. And there was nothing left to do but march. The march continued, the weight of shackles biting into Zalrith's wrists as the streets of New Avalon seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Every step was agony, not from the physical wounds, but from the knowledge that his people had watched him fail. The Zakari Empire had seen its ruler stripped, humiliated, paraded like a trophy. There would be no legend of his defiance, no tale of his glorious battle. Only this. The humans moved with calculated cruelty, but it was not without purpose. Vance knew exactly what he was doing. The display was not for the humans alone, it was a message to every alien empire watching from the far reaches of space. Humanity was not prey. They had been underestimated before, mistaken for a species that would crumble under pressure. The Zakari had believed themselves superior, their fleets vast and their warriors unmatched. That illusion had been shattered. The crowd swelled, their jeers turning into a rhythmic chant. Zalrith could not understand the words, but their tone was unmistakable: celebration, dominance. He forced himself to keep his head high, his golden eyes scanning the streets, searching for anything, any opportunity. But he saw nothing except the endless sea of humanity, reveling in their triumph. Vance walked beside him, exuding a quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing he had already won. "Tell me, King," he mused, his voice almost conversational, "was it worth it?" Zalrith refused to answer. His silence was all he had left. The general smirked. "I'll take that as a no." He gestured forward. "You see, the problem with being a conqueror is that you assume everyone else wants to be conquered. You thought we would surrender. That we would kneel. But humans, well, we don't do that." A soldier nearby laughed. "We make the rules now, scalebag." Zalrith clenched his jaw. He had once imagined marching his armies through the ruins of Earth's cities, claiming the world as a prize of war. Instead, he now walked in chains through the streets of its capital, a spectacle for their amusement. The execution square was close now. He could hear the hum of the holodrones capturing every angle, every disgraceful moment. He imagined how his people must feel watching this. Did they grieve? Did they curse his name for leading them to ruin? He would never know. A sudden movement to his right snapped his attention back to the present. A figure darted from the crowd, lunging forward with something hidden in their sleeve. Zalrith tensed, recognizing the desperation of the act. A final attempt? A loyal follower willing to risk it all? The answer came in an instant. The flash of a human rifle, the crack of a shot. The figure crumpled before they could even get close. Another hopeful rebellion, snuffed out in a heartbeat. Vance didn't even flinch. He barely even turned his head. Predictable. Zalrith felt his stomach turn. This wasn't just a defeat. It was total, absolute submission. Every effort to resist had been accounted for, every attempt crushed without hesitation. A final push sent him to his knees as they reached the center of the square. The humans roared in approval. Vance stepped forward, raising his hands to silence them. "This is what happens to those who demand war with humanity," he declared, his voice booming. "This is the fate of those who seek to break us. They are the ones who are broken instead." Zalrith closed his eyes. He had wanted to die with honor, to fall in glorious battle. Instead, he would die a lesson, a warning. The last sound he heard was Vance's command. "End it." And then, nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Zalrith had thought the shot would come instantly, that his execution would be swift. Instead, the humans let the moment hang, stretching out his suffering, letting the galaxy watch as he kneeled in the dirt, waiting for death that did not come. Vance steadied him, eyes gleaming with something almost resembling amusement. He pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed it. A holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a live feed of a fleet, a Zakari fleet, or what was left of it. The cameras zoomed in on their flagship, its hull burning, its weapons useless. The remnants of the once mighty armada floated in the void, helpless against the human blockade. Their desperate transmissions crackled with panic, seeking orders from a king who would never give them again. "You thought we'd just kill you and be done with it?" Vance asked, tilting his head. "No, that'd be too easy. We needed them to see this first." He turned the screen so Zalrith could watch his empire crumble in real time. A hollow feeling spread through him. His warriors, his loyal commanders, they had come to save him. And now they were dying, picked off one by one, caught in the trap humanity had laid. He had not just led them into war. He had led them into extinction. A strangled sound escaped him, something between a growl and a plea. You planned this." "Of course we did." Vance's voice was steady, his smile faint. "You thought we paraded you here for our own amusement?" "No, King. This was bait. Your people are predictable. They couldn't stand the sight of you like this, couldn't let their god king suffer humiliation. So they came charging in, blind with rage." He gestured to the screen. "And now they're gone." Zalrith could see it, his capital ship breaking apart, explosions ripping through its core. The transmission cut out, static filling the screen before Vance shut it off. The crowd, sensing the climax, began to chant again. This time, the words were unmistakable. "Execute! Execute! Execute!" Vance let the moment linger just a little longer before nodding to his men. A soldier stepped forward, raising a sleek execution pistol. Zalrith straightened, inhaled deeply. He would not beg. Not now. The shot rang out, but it did not hit him. Instead, it burned through the metal collar on his neck. The chains fell away. The crowd gasped, confused murmurs rippling through them. Zalrith's eyes widened. What game was this? Vance leaned in, voice low. "You're not dying today, King." "Not yet." A transport hovered into view, its doors opening, revealing a reinforced containment cell inside. "You wanted to be a ruler of war," Vance continued. "But you're going to live long enough to watch the age of the Zakari end. You will sit in a cell while the galaxy forgets you, while your name becomes a curse," a joke whispered in hushed tones. The realization struck harder than any blow. They weren't just killing him. They were erasing him. The soldiers hauled him to his feet, dragging him toward the waiting ship. The crowd's roar turned into confusion, then something worse, disinterest. He was no longer a spectacle. He was no longer anything. As the door sealed shut behind him, the last thing Zalrith saw was Vance, smiling as he gave the final order. "Take him away." Zalrith felt the ship's engines hum beneath him as he was transported far from the cheering crowds and flashing cameras. His new reality was cold metal and neon lights, the corridor outside his cell lined with human guards who barely acknowledged his presence. He was a relic of a lost empire now, a living prize used to underscore humanity's dominance. That knowledge weighed heavier than any chain. He stared at his reflection in the cell's polished wall. Without his regal attire, he looked almost pitiful. A dull shimmer clung to his scales, marks of dried blood still visible across the ridges of his face. He touched the bruises, remembering the jeers, the spit, the laughter. Part of him wanted to roar in defiance, to scratch and claw until they put a bullet in his skull. Another part of him recognized that was exactly what they wanted, a final act of defiance to justify ending him. A hiss sounded from the door. General Vance stepped inside, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The man held a cup of coffee, an odd casualness in the midst of such tension. He assessed Zalrith with a clinical eye, taking a sip before speaking. "You look better without all that ridiculous regalia," he remarked. "And by better, I mean less pompous." Zalrith bared his fangs. "I'd tear you in half if these restraints weren't holding me back." Vance smirked. "Sure you would, big guy." He tapped a screen on the wall, pulling up a holodisplay of star charts. See these? He zoomed in on Zakari territory, once marked in bold colors, now scattered with red indicators. We've taken your colonies. The survivors either fled or surrendered. The might of the Zakari Empire is gone. A mocking grin tugged at his lips as he pulled up an image of a human pilot leaning out of a warship, casually flipping off the camera. We're broadcasting messages in all directions, letting every species know the king has fallen. The empire is finished. And humanity isn't in the mood to play nice anymore. Zalrith's chest tightened. He despised the smugness, but he sensed something darker beneath the surface. You're enjoying this too much. Vance shrugged. I won't lie. There's a certain satisfaction in proving everyone wrong about us. For centuries, your kind believed we were soft, that we wouldn't fight if pushed. Yet here we are, forging a reputation on your bones. He looked Zalrith in the eye. Of course, you were part of that mistake, and now you're going to help us demonstrate what happens to anyone who dares follow in your footsteps. You think fear will keep you safe? Zalrith hissed. Eventually, someone stronger will come. It always happens. Galaxies don't stagnate, they evolve. Another power will rise, and you'll be the ones groveling. Vance chuckled. Maybe. But we'll be ready. He finished his coffee, tossing the empty cup aside. Speaking of being ready, I have a job for you. You see, we could just keep you locked up here, feeding you scraps and letting you rot in obscurity. But there's a better option. You're going to deliver a message to anyone who's still got the nerve to challenge us. Before Zalrith could respond, 2 guards entered, hefting a crate of recording equipment. They began setting it up in the corner of the cell, ignoring his baleful stare. The overhead lights buzzed, revealing the plan etched into Vance's face, a public broadcast, featuring the king of the Zakari himself, forced to confirm his total defeat. You will read from a script, Vance continued, his voice calm but unyielding, and you will tell every last species in this galaxy that the Zakari Empire has been eradicated. Then you will advise them, no, beg them, to avoid humanity's wrath. Zalrith snorted. You think I'll beg? You will if you want your people in those prisoner camps to live, Vance replied, the shadows under his eyes betraying no mercy. We've captured plenty. Civilians, soldiers, a few of your nobles. We can make their existence pleasant, or we can make it miserable. It all depends on you. A slow, bitter realization settled in. He was as good as dead, but his people, those who remained, were now bargaining chips. Defiance would mean their suffering. Compliance would mean living out his days as a puppet. He glanced at the camera equipment. I suppose you've thought of everything. Vance shrugged. We're thorough. Goes with the territory of being an inferior race, right? He slid a datapad under the cell's barrier, the screen glowing with lines of carefully chosen text. Read it, memorize it. We go live in an hour. Zalrith lifted the pad, scanning the words. They were vile, dripping with submission, proclaiming humanity's dominance and the irrevocable downfall of the Zakari. A wave of nausea coursed through him. But the faces of his people, those still alive, flashed in his mind. He pictured the soldier who'd once saved him from an assassin's blade, a dedicated warrior who believed unconditionally in the Empire's glory. He thought of the children in the royal city, cheering his name when he had returned from a victorious campaign. All those lives now hung in the balance. The hours slipped by with agonizing slowness. The guards returned, powering up the lights, adjusting the camera, and stepping back to frame him perfectly. A microphone was placed in front of him, cables snaking across the floor. He felt exposed, as though his entire spirit was laid bare. A signal flashed green. The broadcast began. Every corner of known space would receive his words. He swallowed his pride, tasting bitterness on his tongue. The lines from the script burned in his thoughts, but he forced them out in a trembling voice. My name is Zalrith, once called the Indomitable. I speak now as a prisoner of humanity. He continued, each sentence a stab in his heart, every declaration a blade twisting deeper. He renounced the Zakari Empire's claim to power, urging all who heard him to heed the might of the Terran forces. He repeated exactly what Vance wanted, painting humanity as an unstoppable juggernaut. At the end, he hesitated, feeling the weight of the final words on the pad. He could almost hear the scoff of his ancestors, sense their disgust at his cowardice. Yet he had no choice. The threat to his remaining people was real. "I beg you, do not challenge them," he finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "You will only share our fate." He set the pad down, and Vance's slow clap filled the silence, echoing in the confined space. "Well done, Your Highness." That wasn't so hard, was it? Zalrith couldn't meet the human's eyes. He felt hollow, his dignity sold to secure meager mercy for those he'd already failed. The cameras powered off, the lights dimmed, and one by one, the onlookers filed out, leaving him alone with the knowledge that his every word would ricochet across the galaxy. He lowered his head, rage and grief warring within. This was worse than death. Death would have been defiance, an end worthy of a king. What he had now was an existence defined by a single chilling truth. Humanity had won.